Hi everybody, it's Susan from Sunrise Quilt Studio, and today I have another vintage block for you. This one is called Baby Bunting, and it is a basket block. And I made this one in yellow and aqua, and it goes together pretty easily. It's not difficult. There's flying geese units and half square triangles in here. But the thing with basket blocks is a lot of them you have to put together in sections and not in rows. So when you sew this together, as you can see, the seams, the rows don't go all the way across. You know, you got this big section kind of in the way there. So anyway, I hope you will stick with me and I'll show you how to make this block. Here are the fabrics that you're going to need to make the Baby Bunting block. A is two 3.5-inch squares, B is two 3.5-inch squares, and C is four 3.5-inch squares. Now these squares, you're going to draw a diagonal line on this back from one corner to the opposite corner. D is one 4-inch square. E is four pieces that are 3.5 by 6.5. F is two 3.5-inch squares, and G is one 4-inch square. So we're going to get started by making the unit in the center of the block, this here, which is a 4-patch. So we're going to take the A and the B squares and make 4-patch unit from them. Okay, so we're going to take the A and the B squares and we're going to sew them together. So one A to one B, right sides together, and we'll make two sets of these. So we'll have two sets of two. And I'm just going to chain piece them together. Okay, so now I have two pair that look like this, and now I'm going to press, and I'm going to press towards the teal color. It doesn't really matter on this one because they're both about the same value. They're both a medium value. So I'm going to go ahead and choose one and press in that direction. Okay, so now I'm going to sew them together. So we're going to put opposite colors together, and I'm going to nest this seam here. So I'm just putting those two seams snug up against each other. I'm going to go ahead and put a pin there. And then we're going to sew them together. Okay, so here is our 4-patch. So there we go. And I'm going to press this seam to one side. You can press it open if you want. So now I'm going to take the E rectangles and the C squares, the ones with the line drawn on the back, and we're going to make flying geese units. So these are kind of big flying geese units, but it'll work with this block. So I'm going to put one square on the side, and since these are kind of big, I'm going to go ahead and put a pin in there, and I'm going to sew from one corner to the next, and I'm going to start here in the middle and go out to the outer corner. It just helps prevent the feed dogs from It helps prevent the needle from pushing fabric down into the feed dogs when I do it this way. Okay, I'm going to do that side of the triangle. Just lining up my raw edges, and I'm going to place a pin, and let's go from this side. Okay, so I've got them, and now I'm going to trim and press. And these triangles are large enough that if you want to, you can sew a 1/2 inch towards the outside of this line and then cut in between those, and you'd have a 1/2 square triangle here. But for today, I'm just going to trim these off and set them aside, and I'll sew them together later, because I want to just go ahead and finish this. We've hit a heat wave here in Missouri, and it's really hard to find time where the air conditioner is not running to come down here and film. So okay, I fold that out, that's what I get. So I'm going to go ahead and press these 2 triangles out. Okay, so here is half of the flying geese unit, so I'm going to put the other C-squares on the other side and do the same thing, only the draw line is going from the center to the lower right hand corner this time. So I'm going to line those up and place a pin again. And then go ahead and sew that seam. And do the same with this one. And then I'm going to cut these triangles off and leave a 1/4 inch of a seam allowance there. Okay, and then when I press these out, I will have the flying geese unit. Okay, so there are the pressed flying geese units. That's what it looks like on the back. Okay, so now we're going to make a 1/2 square triangle, and here I have a G square, and I'm going to put that right side together with the D square, and I'll have the G square on the tops. It has the diagonal line drawn on the back so that I can see that, and I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch away from both sides of that drawn line. Okay, so now I need to cut it apart on that drawn line. So we're just going to cut right on the line. You can use your rotary cutter for this too, of course. And now I have 2 1/2 square triangles, so I'm going to press these towards the yellow. Okay, so now I need to trim off the dog ears, so I'm just going to clip them off. Okay, now we're ready to lay out the block, and sew it together. For this block, I'm going to put it together in sections and then put the sections together. So there are different ways you can do this, but what I'm going to do today is I'm going to sew these two together, these two, and then I'll sew these three together. And then I'm going to sew these three sections all together and then add this one. So I hope that makes sense. But I'm going to start by sewing all of these together like this. So I'll sew across here, and here I have a point to match up with the seam, so I'll do that. Everything else doesn't have anything to worry about. It's just that point right there. And then when I get to sewing these three units together, then I'll have to match this point to this seam. So I'm going to adjust the camera and I'll start sewing this together. Okay, here's where I need to match the point. So I'm going to put a pin through the point of that flying geese and then put it through the seam here so that they line up. Now it looks like a good position, so I'm going to pin that and then sew it. And my goal is to not blunt off the point. So I want to sew just to the right of the intersection where the seams cross in that flying geese unit. Now as I was getting ready to sew this half square triangle unit on, I realized that I did not trim this down. Now the directions have it a little bit larger than what it needs to be. So I'm going to trim that down. It needs to be 3.5 inches finished, and this is just about 3 5/8. So we're going to trim that down. So I am lining up the diagonal line on the ruler with the seam line on the square, and then the cut edges are lined up at the 3.5 inch mark there. So this isn't a whole lot larger, but it is a little bit. Now if I had cut these squares at 3 7/8 when I made them into half square triangles, they may have been just a little bit too small. So I'm going to go ahead and this just works better for me. There are other ways to make half square triangles. Of course, you can use triangle paper, and you can use other tools to do this. Just whatever works best for you. This, I find, is the most accurate way for me. And I have not tried triangle paper, so I don't know how that would work, but this does work well for me. So now we're ready to sew those two pieces together. When I lined these two up before, I had a lot of extra fabric from the half square triangle, and that reminded me I needed to trim that down. That's the kind of thing that happens when I'm in a hurry and I'm just trying to get this block done before the AC kicks on again. And then I'm going to sew the last section together. So I'm going to sew the 3.5 inch pieces, the smaller pieces, together first. And then sew on the rectangle. Okay, I'm going to press seams and then we will sew these units together. Alright, now I need to sew all these sections together, so I'm going to start with the Flying Geese unit here, and I'm going to match seams and points. There's a seam right here, and then I'm going to match this. Going to match this Flying Geese point here. I'm going to match that to the seam here. And you can do that with the pin, or you can just pull it back and make sure that it's in place. I'm going to do it with the pin. That way I can line it up a little bit closer to where I want it to be. And pin that. And the seams, I pressed the seams so that they would nest. So if you like to press your seams open, and you don't have to worry about that, but I like to nest my seams. I think I get a better result when I do that. So you just have to do what works best for you. Take a look at that. I want to check the point on the Flying Geese, and that looks pretty good. And now I'm going to sew this section on, and I just have one seam to match on this one. Okay, here is that much of it now. So I'm going to press, and then we'll sew on the last section and we'll be done. Okay, I have two seams to match here, so we're going to nest those together. And pin them in place. Now right here I do have a point. Ideally that should match with the point here. So we've got that point and I've got this point. So I'm going to push my pin through the point of this side and through here at the point, so I can line them up. And this is the base of the basket, so ideally you want those two to line up. Okay, so now we can sew this seam. And here is the point. It's a lot of layers right there, so it's a little reluctant to go through it. Okay. And let's take a look at that and see if I need to make any changes. Okay, it's not too bad. Okay, so it's time to press and look at the block. Okay, so here is the Baby Bunting quilt block. Well, that's it for this video on the Baby Bunting block. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please click that like button. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and click that notification bell so you'll be notified when the next video comes up. And in the meantime, I hope you're all staying safe and healthy, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. For more quilting ideas, click on the video links. And to keep up with my latest projects, click on the subscribe button. I hope to see you again soon.